Morning. Good morning to MABA. Happy to see everyone. And I hope Francesca is there and can help me with the slides this morning. I am going to continue my talk on the mindfulness of feeling. Last time when I gave this talk, I went very deeply into part 1 and part 2, maybe a little bit too deeply. So today what I want to do is to really spend more time just touching to the main points of all 6 parts of mindfulness of feeling and not dwell on any part for too long. And then from there to be able to focus on the jhanas, on concentration practice for just a few minutes. And then we will have some time for Q&A, and hopefully Master will be able to give some commentary as well. So I'm not sure what's happening with the screen, but all will be well here in a moment. Very good. So thank you, Francesca. I want to go to the slide, the next slide, where I'm going to say, before starting, I'm going to present a little puzzle for you. And this puzzle is about speaking and keeping silent, and it's about external and internal. So this is the puzzle. We go to the next. This is about the master, who his name is Feng Shui. And he's also a preceptor in this particular case from the Wuman, where he gives, he's asked a question by one of the monks who apparently has him as his preceptor. So the monk asks, speech and silence cross the mind inward and outward. How can we freely pass through without making a mess? Literally meaning, how can we pass through without breaking the precepts or making an infraction? So the master responds to this with this verse. Long ago, remembering how in Jiangnan province, in the heart of the 3rd month, partridges call, how fragrant the hundreds of flowers. So I'm going to plant this seed, and then hopefully we have time, we can come back to this for a moment. So now on to our talk of mindfulness of feeling, and we have this this design that I made of the 6 parts. And because of our time here, what I would like to do is to fast forward to slide number 13, where I'm going to actually go through the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and I'm going to read to you from Mindfulness of Feeling, because I went through the other parts before. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to read to you the 6 parts of the Mindfulness of Feeling. And how does a monk remain focused on feeling in and of themselves? There is the case where a monk, when feeling a painful feeling, discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling. When feeling a pleasant feeling, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he discerns, I am feeling neither a painful nor a pleasant feeling. When feeling a painful feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling of the flesh. When feeling a painful feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a painful feeling not of the flesh. When feeling a pleasant feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling of the flesh. When feeling a pleasant feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a pleasant feeling not of the flesh. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling of the flesh. When feeling a neither painful nor pleasant feeling not of the flesh, he discerns, I am feeling neither a painful nor a pleasant feeling not of the flesh. In this way, he remains focused internally on feelings in and of themselves, or externally on feelings in and of themselves, or both internally and externally on feelings in and of themselves. Or he remains focused on the phenomenon of origination with regard to feeling, on the phenomenon of passing away with regard to feelings, or on the phenomenon of origination and passing away with regard to feelings. Or his mindfulness that there are feelings is maintained to the extent of knowledge and remembrance. And he remains independent, unsustained by or not clinging to anything in this world. This is how a monk remains focused on feelings in and of themselves. So this concludes the teaching from the Satipatthana Sutta on mindfulness of feeling. This is actually the shortest of the 4 sections. Last time I had made a point of the fact that when we look at the Chinese translation of this, they use not the traditional word of shou for feeling, they use a more ancient word, jie, for this feeling. And we discussed that a little bit last time, and Master gave a little commentary on that as well. So as we move forward, we can see that this is divided into 6 parts. The 3 types of feeling, the of the flesh, not of the flesh, internal, originating and vanishing, remembrance and mindfulness, and non-clinging. So I made this chart, but also this diagram where you can see all of the 6 parts as they're connected to feeling. As we move on, I'm going to just spend 1 minute each on the 6 parts. First, unpleasant or painful. Unpleasant, dukkha, is a familiar Pali word for suffering, dissatisfaction, and distress. Pleasant or pleasurable is the word sukha, which is the opposite of dukkha, meaning happiness, satisfaction and pleasant, free from distress. And then, of course, there's the neither painful nor pleasant, adukkha asukha, which is a little confusing because this term has several levels of meaning, depending on the context in which it is spoken about. Sometimes it means that the feeling is unknown or hasn't risen to the point where a person can distinguish or notice what it is. Sometimes it means neutral in situations, sometimes means indifferent or even equanimous, relating to equanimity. Unknown is a good starting point here. So these 3 types of feeling is the tendency, first, in the untrained mind, is to avoid or avert what is unpleasant and attach to or prolong what is pleasant, and to ignore and dismiss what is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And some people go so far as to attach to what is unpleasant by complaining incessantly, noisily or subtly about the enormity of their problems and difficulties. Equally inverted in their views, others turn to what is pleasant. They turn that into what's unpleasant, destroying a happy relationship with a constant criticism and selfish demands. Others will attempt to avoid life's problems by escaping into entertainment, lethargy, or fantasy, into their technology devices sometimes, lacking any interest in finding a purpose, a career, or even a relationship. So the first step of practicing mindfulness of feeling is to simply observe the bodily sensations without interference. That is, without trying to get rid of or prolong or numb out to whatever the feeling sensation might be, in the same way that we would focus on the breath or on the body, just observing. So part 2 is of the flesh and not of the flesh. And we read about this before, about the painful and the pleasant feeling that is either of the flesh or not of the flesh. So if we go to the next slide, we can see that these two words, samisa and niramisa, have to do with of the flesh or not of the flesh. The of the flesh feeling has to do specifically with our senses, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body. And the not of the flesh feelings are primarily experienced when we enter into the deeper states of concentration in the jhana. For example, the word sukha, which means pleasant, it can be experienced in used as just a pleasant feeling of the uninstructed person. They feel happiness or pleasure. They call that sukha. But then there's a whole other level of sukha, the sukha that is experienced in the deep stages of concentration. So those are the same word, but they have very different experiences. So as we move on, we can see that we can say that most people are mostly aware of their bodily, of the flesh feeling. And when we practice the mindfulness, we can go beyond that in our practice and begin perhaps to experience the not of the flesh. As we go to the next slide, we can see here that the experience of not of the flesh is actually quite profound, and we can progress into different stages of deep concentration, but this is going to require more information and more discussion. So I'm going to leave that for later. So the next part, Satipatthana refrain, is called by Bhikkhu Analayo because the next section of parts 3 through 6 are found at the end of each one of the 4 foundations: mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of phenomenon. All end with this same phrase, except that the word body, feeling, mind, or phenomenon is inserted. In this way, he remains focused internally on feelings, etc. Then he remains focused on the phenomenon of the origination and cessation, or he is mindful that there are these feelings, and then he is not attached. As we go to the next one, this internal and external, he remains focused internally on feelings in and of themselves or externally. The word here, ajata, is a very profound word that requires a lot of study to understand this word, ajata and badhita. This is a very profound kind of understanding of what it means to experience something internally and externally. As we go to the next slide, we can see that this internal is related to what's personal, subjective, and what is external has to do with what's outside. And this has many levels of meaning that I'm not going to go into right now. This is a more scholarly discussion. But here we can experience when we look inside and when we look outside. We understand when we look outside, we use our senses, our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. But when we're looking inside, we use a deeper kind of concentration sense. And so these can be either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, in the same way that the other examples can be used. I'm just kind of going through this, and the internal, sometimes we talk about internal and external from the point of view of the four postures: walking, standing, sitting, lying down. Meditation can be practiced in any of these four postures. And so that's one of the levels of meaning. Another level of meaning has to do with whether it's sense-based or non-sense-based, as I alluded to before. I know I'm going through the slides a little bit quickly, but I don't want to dwell on anything too much. So here we're talking about learning how to practice our deeper levels of concentration without being dependent on external conditions. So when a person's mind is dependent on the external conditions, what happens is that if something that they enjoy happens, things go their way, they become happy. When things don't go their way, something happens they don't enjoy, they become unhappy. So this is a very up and down mind, always focused on the external world. So they're trying to control the external world to try to make things happen the way that they want. And as we can see in the world, it doesn't matter what position you're in. You can be the leader of the world, but you still can't make things happen the way that you would like. And so the mind goes up and down, becomes very agitated and distressed. The next part, which is originating and vanishing, passing away, the person remains focused on the phenomenon of arising and ceasing. So this rising and ceasing, very something that we know about from just observing how the mind goes up and down, how the breath goes in and out, how our thoughts come in and go out, how our feelings come in and go out. There's one little nuance here that I'll bring to your attention. There is a word, samudaya, which is also another word, samudaya. And just recently, I recognized that these two words actually have a different meaning. Without the long A, samudaya, this means origin or originating, and samudaya, with the long A, this means to aggregate or come together. And actually, when you look at the Chinese, they use the meaning of aggregation. That's the Chinese term. So it gets a little bit confusing, because if we go to the next slide, you can see that they use the word for aggregation rather than the word for arising when they do that. So we need to learn how our emotions and our feelings, our mind, our physical sensations, which is what this Vedana is about. We learn to observe them, how they come up and how they go down. So finally, necessary for knowledge and remembrance. So we realize that the Buddha said, it's not we're trying to forget. Soon as trying to be in the moment, we're so much in the moment, we don't pay attention to what we experienced in the past. This would be a mistake. So we experience things from the point of view of knowing the experience, and we remember what's important in the experience. So that would be the mistaken view of mindfulness, is all it means is being in the moment. We need to learn how to return to the moment, but when we return to the moment, we also have with us the knowledge and remembrance of what's important. So we can go more deeply into this, but basically, just to give you an example, I don't know if any of you have, this is a little cartoon I found for you here that says, I ever wonder if these are loaded with antioxidants. So I don't know if any of you have an Uncle Fred. Yes, we all had an Uncle Fred when we were Neanderthals. We loved Uncle Fred, but one day he went out and ate a bunch of purple berries. and he fell over, and we were unable to wake him up. There he was on the ground with purple all over his hands and his mouth. And we touched the purple berry to our tongue, and it was yucky. And we knew then that purple berries from this plant would kill us. And we remembered this. This is being mindful. All throughout our lives, we learn from our experiences, and we are mindful of that, and we bring it into the present. But at the same time, we don't cling to it. We don't go around thinking berries are going to chase us around and make us sick. We just know which berries are trouble, and we stay away from them. But the whole mind is not consumed by this, frightened all the time, which berry might hurt us. So the person remains independent, unstained, not clinging to anything in this world. So if we go to the slide that says not clinging, the 4 kinds of not clinging, we are careful not to cling to sensual pleasure. We don't cling to views. We don't cling to rules and observances, thinking that rules and observances are going to help us to become enlightened. They're just there to keep us focused. And we don't cling to the belief of our own self-identity. These are very profound things that we've discussed in our study group. So I was hoping that I would be able to go through and discuss the jhanas in great detail, but I see that my time is up. So I'm going to fast forward now back to slide number 64. And I'm just going to have you notice again this gung-an, this riddle, about how it is that we're all challenged whenever we're in a situation. We need to be able to know, is this a time to speak, or is this a time to be silent? Are we looking inward, or are we looking outward? And how can we do this without making a mess of things? Oh, we can remember some of the lessons that we learned from our past. Again, of course, the gung-an is something that we have to experience very deeply within ourselves. So my time has passed, so now my speaking will turn to silence.